Oh, it's so wonderful to be with all of you. This is our hope when we do these, that we'll have a nice big group to share with. So thanks for being here. And because we have a lot to cover, I think we should get started.
Yes.
First, shall we introduce ourselves? Is that on a slide, Lola?
It is, yeah.
All right.
Coming right up.
We're going to share our screen.
Whoops,
Yes.
let's not get to that just yet.
Yes.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. We're here today to take a look at a transition timeline. What you're all here for. Welcome to our second of 4 different transition family learning opportunities that we're having this year, Pam, Kathy, and myself. We're really glad to have such a big group here. You can, during this presentation, feel free to add questions or comments into the chat box. We probably won't have time for live questions and answers, but we will go back to all of the questions after the session is over and answer them. You can also feel free to email any one of us later on with questions or support. I'm Lola Piscopo. I'm a Capstone teacher here at Cotting. My email is found right on this slide, and we will share all of these slides with you as well.
I'm Kathy Tyrer. I'm the guidance counselor here, and part of my job is to support parents through the transition process. So feel free to contact me if you would like to start that support now, if you haven't already met with me.
And I'm Pam Varrin. I know all of you, and I hope you all know me. I'm the family support coordinator here at Cotting, and it's my pleasure and privilege to be with parents through all stages of their time at Cotting, including this important time preparing for transition. Excited to be with you.
Right.
So I'm going to start us off here with a little bit of teacher talk. Since I am a teacher, you'll find all of this information that we're sharing with you on the ARC's transition timeline. So no need to take notes. We're going to share it all with you. I wanted to say that transition services are a coordinated set of activities for a child with a disability. Maybe you know this already. But here is our definition from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. It's designed to be within a results-oriented process that's focused on improving the academic and functional achievement of the child with a disability, to facilitate the child's movement from school to post-school activities. And these post-school activities might include post-secondary education, vocational education, integrated employment, and that might also be supported employment or volunteering, continuing in adult education, adult services, and independent living or community participation. Now, the transition services are based on the individual child's needs, their preferences, strengths, and interests. And it includes instruction and related services, community experiences, developing employment and other post-school adult living objectives, and when appropriate, working on daily living skills and maybe functional vocational evaluation. So that's a lot of words. And I'm going to channel my inner Kathy Tyrer to say, all of these fancy words means that transition is a process, it's a journey, it's a process. It's not a destination, it's not one thing. And this process is driven by your vision and your child's vision for education, for employment, and for community. And all of that being said, every student and family is unique. So this timeline that we're sharing is an outline, it's a guide. But for every family and every child, the process is going to be unique. So some things might happen earlier, some things might happen later, and that's okay. This timeline is a starting place. Don't panic. Let's all take a deep breath before we start. I'm going to also take a deep breath. And just take a minute to think about the big picture. I'm going to read this quote that I really love from Davis and Weimeyer, and you'll find this right on the transition timeline. The road to leading to a successful transition from childhood to adulthood should begin much earlier than the teenage years. It starts when children learn about themselves, their strengths and weaknesses, and so doing, begin to value themselves. It ends when, as adults, these same children can take control over choices and decisions that impact their lives and take responsibility for their actions. This is called self-determination. All right, here we go. We're hopping right into the timeline. Before I share that timeline, I want to give you guys an overview of what the whole timeline looks like. We're going to go through part by part.
Yes.
But this timeline is like a brochure. The first page has some background information, some description. And the second page has a breakdown, age by age, what transition steps may be taken at that age. Okay, and we're going to go through each of these parts and speak to each one of them a little bit more, but you'll have access to this whole thing.
Yes, absolutely. And also kind of decode it a little bit, because it sure looks like a lot, and it is a lot. But we've, in our work with groups of parents working towards transition of all ages, we've come to sort of see the things that are helpful to focus on. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
All right, back to it. Sorry, everybody. So we're going to begin with ages 13, 14, and 15. Okay, I'm not going to read through each one of these because, like Pam said, we're here to decode these for you. So we're going to pick a few that we have found are very important to our families and our students and talk about those.
Yes, Lola. I also want to kind of sort of think about the quote that you read. And I think that there are a lot of things on those lists, on this list, that you're already doing. And it's important to recognize that a list of tasks for transition are not new tasks. It can feel like, oh, I need to do this in a somewhat different way than I've been doing it. But the ways in which you are doing these tasks are going to be very individualized to your children already. So I want you to keep that in mind as we go through this. The other thing I'd like you to keep in mind is that you're not doing these things alone. There are many of the tasks on this list that you are that you have partners in, and that's the school, and that's the IEP, and the goals on your child's IEP, and the programmatic opportunities that Cotting provides. There are lots of skills that your students are working on at Cotting that are also on these lists, on these different age-related lists. So keep that in mind as we go through as well. All right. So some of you may know that at Cotting, we work with a group of parents of students in different age ranges to focus on some of these tasks. And our group of 13, 14, 15-year-old parents of 13, 14, 15-year-old students have been focusing on vision planning. And one of the things that we talk about in that group is that vision planning is in some ways the first step. However, by the time your student has reached 13, 14, or 15, you've already been creating a vision of their life after school. You come with ideas and experiences that you can use to be able to look at what are the things that will help me towards that vision at this age, rather than thinking that I have to do everything on this list up to age 22. So we want to emphasize that sort of taking things in the age range that your child is in is a helpful way of organizing this process. So creating a vision of life after leaving school is also called person-centered planning. You may, in educational opportunities you have either here at Cotting or outside of Cotting, hear about person-centered planning. We have used Charting the LifeCourse tools to help parents and students think about a vision for their future. It's not complicated. It really is about putting together information about what your child is doing now, the connections they have, the strengths they have, and your vision as a family for what their future, what you would see their future and hope their future would look like. These activities can be continued throughout their teen years. It's important to make sure that the vision and post-secondary goals are reflected in the IEP. And so this is a place where your vision and the fleshing out of your vision can connect with the ways in which the folks who care for and educate your children see the vision for your child. And it's a way of really using those perspectives to enlarge and enrich the possibilities. IEP goals can be and should be developed to support the student's vision. Another focus with all of these tasks is to focus on logistics. What's required to happen while students are still in special education? Cotting parents are very well versed in many of the requirements and laws, and that's a strength of our community here. And many families become deeply involved in understanding this, in making the transition from a placement outside of Cotting to Cotting, and really knowing what your rights are and the procedures that protect and support your vision for your child's growth and development. There are similar laws and regulations around transition. And so part of what you can do as a family is to learn about what the information is from the IDEA regarding transition goals and transition services. It's also a place where your school, at Cotting School, where you can have a partner in understanding what kinds of regulations are supporting this process. Develop a partnership with the school system and become an active participant in the development of your child's IEP. When I said before that there are a lot of things on the list that you're already doing, this is certainly one of them. Parents at Cotting are very active partners in their IEPs. in their children's IEP development. And so you can check that off as something that you're already doing. Focus on volunteering. So this is something that we have learned a lot about, both through the tools and goals in the Charting the LifeCourse process of person-centered planning. We've learned from the parents in our groups about how useful it can be at this age to begin to identify a few places in your community where you and your child may volunteer together. Also, to think about the places in your community in which people know your child well. If you've been in a community for a while, there may be places of business or groups, gathering groups, such as a church, an animal shelter, a library, school, a nail salon, a hairdresser, the kinds of local places where people gather, go for services, and get to know each other. Talk with these folks about your thoughts about what a volunteering job might look like for your child. Is there something that is appreciated about your child that would fit very well with this place of business or this group? We heard from a family in one of our groups about a local nail salon that a student had been going to for many years, who really felt uplifted when their child came to get her nails done. And they felt both a connection in terms of wanting to help in this child's growth and development, but also felt a benefit to the presence of that child. Talk about the jobs and tasks you did in your own life and reflect on the experiences. We all had first jobs. Most of our first jobs are not where we ended up. Talk about what your experience was, what was challenging about those things, what you learned about yourself and what you wanted to do. We can be models, even though our children's trajectory may be somewhat different from our own, we can still be models in terms of thinking about the future by thinking about where you are now. It may help your child to have a better idea of what they like and what they don't like, to hear about what you have liked and what you have not liked. And then this is something I think we're all always focusing on self-awareness and regulation. Self-awareness supports the basic understanding of a child's own strengths, needs, and abilities. With our students here at Cotting and our families, our students are at various places in this process of self-awareness and regulation. But wherever they are, they can also benefit from having someone who is close to them reflect on times when things are well regulated, times where things are, could kind of go either way, and times when it feels when things are more dysregulated. This is something that is important in the development of self-determination. It has to do with helping us and our students to identify what they need when they're having trouble. And this is a process too, like all of this. This doesn't happen overnight. But at these ages, these sort of early to mid-adolescent ages, and continuing through to transition, continuing to reflect and understand, and as much as possible, help children participate in that self-reflection of how, of what they need to be able to be present and participate. As we know, self-regulation is the ability to monitor and control one's own behaviors, actions, and skills in various situations. Here, too, you have partners in this process. Collaborate with your child's teachers, therapists, and counselors because they will all have helpful perspectives on what your child needs to be able to take what steps they can towards self-determination. And as we just said, focus on school team collaboration. This also is something you can check off your list. Become an active member of your child's IEP team, share your vision, communicate questions, successes, ideas, and concerns. It's never too early to think about sharing questions about transition in IEP meetings and having, we have a new IEP coming, new IEP format coming that also kind of privileges transition in a different kind of way. And we're hopeful that that's a place for parents and school staff to collaborate even more actively on the steps of planning for transition.
And Pam, can I just note here, if you're uncertain about bringing a transition related topic up in an IEP, or you're not sure if the teacher is the right person to bring that up with, the three of us right here on this presentation are great people to come to. You can contact Kathy, you can contact Pam, you can contact me, and we're always happy to help to talk or to problem solve.
And here's another thing that you're already in the midst of doing. Focus on activities of daily living. As I talk with Cotting parents, first in their mind always is, how can I increase my child's independence in all areas? Personal care routines develop at very different rates, but they remain important in terms of having the students having the opportunity to begin to take responsibility as they can, and this is different for every student, to take care of their bodies, to think about nutrition practices through cooking, exercise, walk, try new sports, and stay physically active. Now that's a long list right there, a long list and another long list. But I want to point out that you don't have to do all of these things at once. Choose one. Choose something that feels important and something that is not the hardest thing to put into your routine, to make that make that a sort of a planning for transition part of your routine.
All right, I'm going to jump in here and talk about another component of self-determination, which is choice making. So trying to identify ways for your child to make big choices and small choices throughout the day. So this could be something like picking out their clothes in the morning, packing their own lunch, picking their own snack. Learning about choice making is the first step to decision making, which is a bit of a more complex skill that your child is going to be working on later. Choice making and decision making are critical parts of your child having control over their lives and the things that happen in their lives. And there are so many big and small ways that you can do this. You can do some comparing and contrasting at home. You can make pros and cons lists when you're trying to make a decision. And even like I said, those small decisions, like what color shirt do you want to wear today? Or what type of food should we give the cat today? There are a million ways to practice choice making throughout your day. And like Pam said, a lot of these self-determination topics and skills are also things that your child is working on at school throughout the day in their classroom, in their therapy sessions. So this is another one we can check off the list. Everyone's working really hard at this already.
And I will jump in here. We are talking about now ages 16, 17. And these are general ages, you know, these, again, it's a process. It's going to happen a little at a time, and it might be a little different for each one. And I'm going to focus on a little bit further on in this document, because there's a lot of statements here, but I know that Lola will be talking about some of the self-advocacy parts of this in a minute. But I want to help you think about encouraging your students to be independent as they can in all areas, and activities and money management and travel as possible. So that's going to be different for each student, but think about little things when they can make a choice or do some of the pieces of purchasing something, making choices, and thinking about learning how to use a card as opposed to cash sometimes, because isn't that something we do? And just as you're going through your day with them, to be thinking about how they can be leading sometimes, and just, you know, when it's appropriate. But then I wanted to jump ahead to the part that's sort of highlighted here, and talk a little bit about some of the practicality of things. So it's too soon to think about applying for some of the state agencies and benefits, but it isn't too soon to sort of get ready for that, because it's good to start learning about it. So for one thing that's important to know if your child is younger, and while your child is younger, is that if you expect that you're going to be applying for Social Security insurance income when they turn 18, that's the age at which they can do it, that at that time they can't have money in their own name. So specifically, I believe it's around $2,000. Sometimes, you know, that number might change a little bit for different reasons, but really, like if, you know, Aunt Mary wants to give some money to your child, there'll be ways to think about handling that money differently. And you know, there's trust that, like, is a whole topic on itself that we can talk about at another time, but there's other ways to put that money aside so that it doesn't affect their ability to receive the benefits. And so that's just something to begin thinking about now as your child is coming up through the teenage years and approaching 18. And also to begin thinking about what you want to do for guardianship. There's a lot of options for legal protection, and that's a whole conversation all by itself as well. But to begin understanding and learning about it so that at the time of 18, you're kind of ready to handle that situation. So when you're younger, you can just begin doing some of that exploration. And as I said, that's a whole topic in itself. And then to find out what a 688 referral is, because that's something that needs to be done around the age of 18 as well. And so to begin to learn and understand about that, which is basically just a form that's filled out that your team agrees on which adult service agency is the most appropriate lead agency. And we can talk about the different agencies, Department of Developmental Services versus Mass Rehab Commission are sort of the two main ones that we use. So I think that's it for me on this one right now.
All right. So another important thing to focus on during this time, 16, 17 years old, is self-advocacy. Self-advocacy is being able to speak up for your needs and your wants and your preferences, making sure that your child has practice in using vocabulary to advocate so they know how to say, I need something because fill in the blank, or this is, you know what, this is really hard for me, or this is too easy for me. Or do they feel comfortable saying, I really love this activity, or I don't really like that. And for many of our students who use AAC or alternative communication, maybe working with your CT to make sure that they have this vocabulary in their communication devices and you're able to model that and they're able to access that, that vocab to help them to self-advocate. And once again, I know this is a thing that you are all doing at home, and this is something that staff and teachers and therapists at Cotting work on every minute of every day. Focus on IEP participation. So we already know you all are involved in the IEP. You are integral members of the IEP teams. This is a time to really think about how your child can participate in the IEP process themselves. You might take some of those tools from Charting the LifeCourse that you've been using to think about vision planning and get your child involved in that discussion. Think about if they could share a video at the IEP meeting. Think about if they could share photos, or could they pass out invitations? Would it be appropriate for them to stay for the whole meeting or half the meeting? Would they maybe want to email follow-up questions? Can they track progress on their goals and objectives and reflect on how they're doing? There are a lot of different ways that students can get involved in their IEP meeting, and there's no one size fits all. Every student is unique, so the ways that they participate in their IEP meeting are also unique. You know, I've had some students who come just for the first 20 minutes of the IEP. They might share a video. They might introduce themselves to everyone on the team. And I've had other students who have stayed for the entire meeting, and they share their opinions about goals and objectives, and they share their current performance. They share what their experience has been at school. And it's just always a really empowering experience for students to be involved in that process. And this age is a good time to start.
So, and learning about transition, attend parent workshops on transition to become informed about the process. And here you are. And I'm sure many of you have been to many workshops on transition. And I often think that when I'm taking a deep dive into something, that if I learn one thing that I didn't know at a new transition or any other kind of seminar, then it's been a good thing. Reach out to fellow parents, reach out to folks at Cotting, reach out to any one of us. If you're learning things that seem confusing to you, we're always happy to try to talk that through and figure it out, and it helps us as well. We post a lot of workshops, presentations, groups in the weekly update. So you can find them there, or if many of you are on social media, and there are social media groups and Facebook or Instagram. And I think that the more you learn, the more you test that out with other parents and other folks, the process begins to kind of, the pieces of the process fall into place. And then this again is something you can check off. I know how dedicated Cotting families are to drive many miles at any hour of the day or night to help their child participate in activities that foster connections and friendships. We are also your partners in this. We here at Cotting are focusing on helping students connect to each other every day and in every part of their school day. We have a lot of opportunities for families to connect with each other here, and families are very creative about getting together and finding activities that work for different friends with different needs. And that is a huge strength of our community. I see families planning outings, setting up Zoom or FaceTime calls, email, text, and many more. Just remember that this is part of transition planning as well. And of course, independence keeps coming back at this age too. You know, I think every student has their sort of trajectory in terms of how they're learning skills and at what rate. But you may also, if you're at a point where it feels like, I'm thinking and hoping my child can be more independent, but I don't quite know how. Think about higher low-tech tools that could help your child increase independence. One example we've heard of is a med tracker app. But that's another place where we can be your partners and helping to figure that out. We're lucky. There's a lot of technology that can help that is used more widely. So it's not just a people with disabilities kind of thing. And then continue to focus on exploring work. You know, we talked during the last age group about volunteering. Volunteering is always an enormously helpful way to explore what your children like or don't like in a work environment. I know you're all talking about the value of work and teaching behaviors that develop employment potential as we are. Provide opportunities just to see people at work in different settings. We do that through our community trips here and through Project Bridges, but you know, that might be something that would appeal to you as a family to go and visit relatives at their workplace, or think about the kinds of workplace your child might want to see more of. Those visuals can be really important. Again, keep thinking about volunteer job opportunities in the community, assist in good grooming skills, and emphasize the importance of physical fitness. As you see, there are a lot of threads that continue throughout. And because you see it at another age range, doesn't mean you haven't been doing it already. It's just a continuation. And maybe a place to think, you know, should I seek some input on generating ideas or brainstorming things? I'm feeling out of ideas at the moment. We're here for that as well. And then Kathy talked a little bit about guardianship and the alternatives. Many of you know that I'm happy to talk with any Cotting parents about guardianship and the process, the alternatives like shared decision-making, power of attorney, healthcare proxy, and more. Shared decision-making is something that's really coming into its own. It's not a legal process, but it designates folks in your child's life who can participate in that decision-making as a guardian might. We're exploring that in one of our groups this year, and we are hoping to have more information to share with Cotting parents in general as well. Talk with other families about what their experience is. How did they make the decision to become a guardian or not become a guardian, or to have one of the alternatives instead? There's a great website called Your Voice, Your Choice that really focuses on supported decision making, and you can always connect with us.
Well, okay, so that's a lot of things. And this looks like a big list that we're getting ready to go over now. So I would like to pause for just a second and let everybody take another deep breath. And realize that even though this says age 18. I want to reassure you, if you haven't done some of these things and your child is 18 or 19 or even 20, it'll be okay. And we'll get these things done and it will be okay. It's not going to be a life or death situation, because I can't tell you how often that is sort of how it comes up. So I wanted to start with that. And so we'll go on to the individual topics here. Yeah. So we're going to focus again on financial planning. Applying for SSI or Mass Health is something that's very important. You really can't do it until they turn 18. Unless, well, when you do it at 18, what is really important is that your finances as a parent no longer are counted, whether you have guardianship or not. I want to say that because there's been some misinformation sometimes put out that I've heard about. And so whether you're a guardian or not at the age of 18, your income is no longer counted. So that's just something to be aware of. But it is important, as I said before, to talk with a financial planner or do your own research about special needs trusts and other financial planning tools, as I mentioned earlier. Because, go ahead, Pam.
Before we go on, could I just add one small piece to that? When your child turns 18, they are eligible for SSI, as Kathy said, without your income being counted. Adults with disabilities who don't have over $2,000 in their name will generally qualify for SSI. And when they qualify for SSI, in the state of Massachusetts, Medicaid or Mass Health goes along with it automatically. So you don't have to apply separately. If your child has been on Mass Health as a child, you should continue to respond to any of the requests for information to keep them on Mass Health, because there will be a redetermination at 18. Sometimes SSI doesn't get finalized right away, but do know that once your child qualifies for SSI as adult, Mass Health comes along automatically without any kind of premiums.
Thanks, Pam.
Yeah.
And to focus on housing, regardless of your your short-term plans for your students, there are a variety of housing situations that can be considered. And one is to apply for a Section 8 housing voucher. Should in the future, you may want to use that to help create a supported housing situation. It's used in very many creative ways, and it doesn't prevent you from anything else to have applied for that Section 8 housing voucher, which is something that is usually mobile. So you want to begin to explore all those different models of housing possibilities, like adult foster care, group homes, collaborating living models. There's a lot of families here at school have been talking about different ways that they might like to collaborate. There's just so many possibilities that, but those are just some things to begin thinking about. And when you apply for, if you apply for DDS as one of them, one of the adult services, some housing situations come along with that as a possibility, but you do have to request to be prioritized for that. And that's something we can talk about more later. Focus on assessments. Encourage your school system to conduct the appropriate informal and formal transition assessments. So sometimes as a child gets a little bit older, you might want to change your focus so that it's thinking about more practical skills. But I do encourage that there are some assessments that need to be like the psychological evaluation is something you would need for adult services, even if they've had one as a younger person. And even sometimes when they're not, for some of our students, they're not always completely valid because of some of the physical limitations. It's still really good to have sort of a record of whatever could be evaluated in psych evals or IQ tests, because those those facts can be used to help them get the services they need as for adult services, and maybe even for guardianship. So to go ahead and take advantage of those things and talk through the ways that they might need to be used going forward. And your teachers can really give some ideas of some creative ways they might do some practical determinations for transitional things and practical skills, you know, ADLs and those kinds of things. Focus on problems. Oh, Lola.
We're back to a little more self-determination. So now you've probably done this already, but now's a good time to think again about self-determination and problem solving. So helping your child to identify different types of problems, big problems, small problems, anything that comes up in your daily life. Discuss strategies for finding solutions, talking about who can help your child and when certain problems arise in different situations, talking about where you can find resources to solve problems, and thinking about how to adjust your solution if it's not working. And once again, these are things that you are already doing, and these are things that your child is already doing at school. Problem solving is something that our communication therapists talk about a lot, our classroom teachers and our OTs and our PTs, and really everyone talks about, because we encounter a lot of problems during the day, and we have to figure out how do you advocate for help when you encounter a problem, and who's the best person to ask, and do you know what to say? And focus on networking. So connecting with other families who are in your child's class, or connecting with families of alumni who have been through the transition process, asking questions and learning from their experiences. I think that Pam, Kathy, and I all agree that you as families are our most valuable resources here at Cotting School, especially when it comes to transition. So really, these work groups that we've been planning, part of it is to share information, but another part of this process, another important part of this process for us is providing families with the opportunity to have some FaceTime, with the opportunity to connect and to share information and to learn from each other. And I'm taking a quick peek in the chat box, and I see there are a lot of questions, and there are families sharing resources. And this is a perfect example of this networking. This is what we're hoping to get out of this. Any questions you have, any resources you have, type them in the chat box. We're not going to respond to those during this session, but we are going to come back to them. We're going to answer your questions. We're going to reach out to you. We're going to share all of these resources that you are sharing with us, because this networking is a key part of the transition process.
Yes.
Another self-determination topic, goal setting. So teaching your child the process of developing a goal and outlining the steps of a plan, and teaching them how to follow through and measure success. All of your children have goals on their IEP. So once again, I'm going to say that it's really important to make sure that they are involved in that process. Their teacher at school is going to help them be involved in that process, but you can also help them be involved in that process too, in whatever way is appropriate for them. What types of personal goals can they have at home? The IEP is not the only place where we have goals. It's just a small snapshot. Remember that goals can be really big, like getting a job at a library, or they can be really small, like I'm going to have a goal to call a friend once a week to stay in touch.
So focusing on the rights, focus on the rights and responsibilities that your student will have as they grow. Registering to vote, and a person with a disability has also the ability to join all kinds of organizations that support disabilities rights and learn about advocacy through some of these other groups. The ARCs, Easter Sills, they're all rooted in the rights of people with disabilities. And we've had students at Cotting who got involved in some of the disability boards in their own towns and did some advocacy for curb cuts and other kinds of things, right, to allow for accessibility. There's many ways that your student can get involved in those sorts of things. So think about that. And then focus on the referral to the adult services. I mentioned it briefly in the overview before, but at your child's IEP meeting, usually the district will initiate the 688 referral, which is the form I mentioned earlier. It's just a piece of paper. It's not a big deal. What happens is at your meeting, it will be discussed which agency is likely to be the most important lead agency, Department of Developmental Services or Mass Rehab. And several months, it's saying in here several months before you leave school. I say at the age of 18, this should be determined and it should be sent. What I see is the Department of Developmental Services is really, really happy to participate in things right after they receive the referral and go through the eligibility process. Mass Rehab usually doesn't want to get involved till much closer till they're actually leaving the school. And so that's something that's different. But once you figure out which one it's going to be, that's the great thing. And then the town will send a packet of information to whichever one has been determined as the lead agency. And if you have questions about that, I'm happy to talk that through with any individual person, because it's different for each person, which is the best agency. But quite often I find that the Department of Developmental Services is one that has lifelong, once you're in for life, and they have sort of a wider range of services available. So if you are eligible for that one, it's good to get involved in it. Okay. And then here we go again to look at an overview of the things that are coming up here. I would say that we're really going to focus on, we talked about the 688 referral, and I think we'll just go on to the next one here. Yeah. So interagency collaboration. So as you can have more than one adult service. So you can have DDS and MRC, Mass Commission for the Blind, and Commission for the Deaf if your child is eligible for all of those things. And it will really stem from what your child's needs are. And once it's been completed, you can begin inviting these people to your IEPs, but you don't have to wait for the IEP. You can have individual relationships with them. And I just feel like it's important to develop those relationships. And that's the best way. You also need to think about doctors and dentists at the age of 22. Some and most child providers are ready for you to move on to adult providers. And so that's another thing to begin thinking about.
All right. This age 20 to 22 is a critical time to focus on self-determination. So many of those skills we talked about already, promoting appropriate behavior at home and in social situations, providing opportunities to make choices and decisions, exploring taking risks so that you can learn from the experiences of success and failure, helping your child to understand his or her disability, which we'll talk about in a minute. Knowing when to ask for help, who to ask, what they need, that's self-advocacy. And also talking about disclosure. So meaning when they may or may not want to share information about their disability. And let's talk a little bit about disability awareness. So this might start much earlier than 20, and it probably is. But talking with your child about their disability, knowing, can they name it? Do they know what their needs are? Can they describe their strengths, and can they explain their accommodations? A powerful reason to have your students involved in their IEP is that we have these discussions at the IEP, and it's just another great context for them to practice this. You can also help them to join disability-related groups, which Kathy talked about, and organizations and communities. Focus on recreation and leisure. So you might begin to identify and help your child to participate in activities that they would be able to continue after they turn 22. You might join the Cotting alumni community to access alumni sports once they've left Cotting. And you can look for local programs, things like Waypoint Adventures or Snap Arts or Epic Service Warriors, or even just looking in your town recreation department to see what types of activities are available. A focus on post-secondary education. So if your child is interested in lifelong learning or education, you could explore some inclusive college programs. And the Think College website is a great resource if you want to learn more about that. You could connect with the disability office at the local community college, or just exploring adult ed options through your town's office. Maybe there's a cooking class or a first aid class that your child might take. Focus on employment. So identifying real work experiences in the community with your child. Be sure that they have a work history and a resume that highlights their experience, skills, and strengths. And our staff at Project Bridges are working on these things and happy to help and to share these with you. Connecting with your local mass hire office to receive employment support is another great step as your child is getting ready to exit school. And finally, we will leave you with this presentation. Will come to your email, and all of the resources that we referenced during this presentation will be listed on the last page. We will also add some of the resources that you all shared in the chat, and we will take a look at the questions and address those questions as well. And you might hear from one of the three of us, or we might share some of the information from the questions if it's a global question with the group.
Yeah, that was a lot of information and a lot of things to think about. But, you know, just like Pam said at the beginning, if you can take one thing away today and focus on that, that might be enough for today.
Yes. Thank you all for coming. And thank you all, as Lola said, for sharing with each other. That is the huge strength of our community. And we'll look forward to seeing you again soon. We'll be back in the next quarter with another family learning opportunity. Bye-bye.